all set? Okay.
We're not going anywhere, so we're going to
Let's call the meeting to order, and February 13th, 2013, it's 5:05. And just one adjustment to the agenda that I know of. Under reports to the board, let's add 5.7, negotiations, so we'll have an update on that. And any other adjustments to the agenda that anyone needs? Okay, great. Audience and communications, I'd just like to acknowledge a few people who are leaving the CSSU board. We'll miss you because you're retiring from board service, temporarily at least. You never know when you want to come back and do it again.
Do you want me to do a little piece on that? Because I've got a couple things I wanted to say about that particular topic.
Yes.
Want me to do it now?
Well, let me just acknowledge this particular board, and then you can do all of them. So, Paul, thank you for your service on this board. Lynn, thank you for your service on this board. Holly, she's not here yet, but she'll be stepping down as well. And Elaine, did you want to say something else?
Yeah. Every year at this time of the year, the VSBA acknowledges people who have served 9 years, 12 years, and 20 years. 9, 12, 15, and 20. So it's on that particular year. So this year we have a couple people. We have a person who has served 12 years and is being recognized by the VSBA. I wonder who that is, Jean. Jean Jensen.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you can add it to the one that you got for 9 years.
There you go. I think
here's
I got one
someone-
for 10 and 11, too.
And here is someone who is has served 20 years. 20 years. Joan Lennis.
Joan Lennis.
Joan Lennis, amazing. It's wonderful. It makes a difference in an organization when you have people who stay on that length of time and provide that kind of.
Is there a check in those that maybe I'll stay longer?
You don't get one every year? I
can't. Oh.
So
I keep getting closer to Joan. I keep thinking I'm going to get closer, only percentage-wise.
I also want to acknowledge that there are other people who have served a bunch of years. The VSBA only acknowledges and gives certificates for those key years. But in addition to Jean and Joan, Clyde Baldwin has served for 22 years. Colleen McKinnon has served for 18. And Lorna has served for 21. I guess this is her 21st year. So that's a lot of experience on a board. I did also want to take a minute to say thank you to those board members who are leaving us. I don't know why, because I know this is certainly one of my favorite nights of the month to come here. Several of them who are board chairs. Lynn Jonich, after 5 years. After hearing all this, Lynn, I'm thinking you must be saying, wow. I'm shirking my responsibility here. Lynn Jonich, after 5 years. Sue Tebow, 5 years. Paul Lamberson, 6 years, board chair in Heinsberg, thank you. Alan Mead at CVU, 3 years. Holly Ruel, board chair in Williston, 7 years. And Wendy Goodrich, board chair in St. George, 7 years. So that is, I mean, I don't know if you heard how many times I said board chair, but including Holly, we're just recognizing you here. That's a lot of experience and wisdom going out the door. We appreciate it so much. It goes without saying that we will all miss you. You're welcome.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So kudos to you, Holly, for helping us out for so long, and you will be missed. Any other audience and communications? And presentations, none at this point. And we're moving to reports to the board, 5.0. 5.1, risk management update, and Mike Boardman is here to give us our annual update on our risk management. So, Mike? And
I'll join Mike because I don't want him to get into trouble with you guys. stand up here. This is your annual policy requirement that says you like to visit your risk management portfolio, primarily risk management in the sense of your insurance coverage across the spectrum. So what Mike will do is go through what you have today. He's our agent that works between us and insurance providers to make sure we're appropriately covered and ask the right questions. And then you can ask the right questions of both he and I relative to that side of how we overlay. So if you give them an idea of what they...
Fantastic. Yeah, so this is everything other than health insurance. So we won't be dealing with health insurance. So it's the property, the liability, the workers' comp. And I think Bob had sent something in the in your attachments that summarized from 10,000 foot level. So we're not going to get as granular as per each school where the coverages are. Though, yeah, we didn't get that granular, but we'll try to just spend really 4 to 5 minutes just going over coverage, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to ask that. And we'll also talk at the end just about some of the risk management services and what Bob and Cindy and I try to focus on when we're looking at claims and addressing activities in the school that we're trying to address for safety reasons. And a lot of it's due to the claims that have occurred and preventing future claims from occurring. So when we start on the first page that we put in the handout, it's just the property. So we're insuring all of the buildings, the contents, the playgrounds at all the different schools, the computers. It totals about $130 million for all the buildings and everything that's within the buildings. So we also have some flood coverage, earthquake, and we listed up, the schools here as well. So that's pretty much the property coverage. I don't know if anyone has anything in particular that you wanted to get into any detail. Obviously, we've been tested over the past few years on different catastrophic activity that we've been spared, fortunately, here at Chittenden South, but not so fortunate in other parts of the state.
Michael, one benefit of being an SU, you each carry individual insurance on each of your buildings, but relative to an event, we would look at the pool, an additive pool of all the values across the schools to provide coverage to any singular event that occurs. So you get some benefit of adding up all the values together to cover events, whether they happen in any single school or a number of schools. The most significant insurance claim in that arena in the last 10 years has been the fire in Shelburne.
Fire at Shelburne, I would say.
With the destruction of the modular classrooms and then the replacement on the generosity of the CVU board to allow those to go back in use in Shelburne.
Question, what's the equipment breakdown?
Pardon me?
It says equipment breakdown for $1 million?
Yeah, that's mechanical equipment breakdown. So your HVAC system fails. So it's not due to wear and tear. This is mechanical breakdown, accidental mechanical breakdown. So we have coverage for that as well. So the next page, we get into crime coverage. We've been reading a lot of these type of claims in the paper. A lot of municipalities have had these type of claims, but it's employee dishonesty. So the school district has, for all employees, $100,000, and then we have extra coverage for certain positions that obviously have more access to cash within the school districts. So we list them there, and the most we would have for any one theft is $200,000 for some of those, some of those positions are a little more, have more access to the financials.
I know of no recent claim in that area.
On that one, because we've certainly seen around Vermont places where several $100,000 and in some cases 7 figures have been embezzled. How do they look at it as a single incident? Is it I stole $100,000 this year, I stole $100,000 next year, and $100,000 the following year? Is that 3 instances at 100 apiece, or is that a cumulative 300? In which case this isn't adequate.
No, that's a good point. It is per incident. I mean, unless they're somehow tied together. That's a very good question. And sometimes there is some, typically whoever has done this, they're setting up a fictitious vendor account and they're writing checks.
Yep.
Different accounts. I mean, that type of situation, that is considered one occurrence. I mean, if they're writing a regular check, they've set up a fictitious account, it's one occurrence. When the claim is made, all of a sudden the school district realizes we've got a problem here. We present the claim to the insurance company, they start investigating and realize it's the same person that's been doing this repetitively. That would be one occurrence.
So you start to get into, kind of parsing how much is, a pattern and is that single occurrence versus how many of them are separate occurrences? Because, like I say, $200,000 relative to some of the stuff we've seen going on in Vermont, where it's been one person and it probably falls into what you're talking about, the pattern. I just question whether that's adequate and how much more, a higher level of insurance would cost, the overrides for some of the different positions.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think the checks and balances here are a little more sophisticated. Some of those, like the one in Hardwick, there was 5 employees. It's such a small, that's typically where a lot of that has gone on, or smaller private companies as well. But I think Bob could address some of the checks and balances I would think that are in place.
Yeah, our primarily work in fraud and prevention is designing systems and procedures that preclude the opportunity or limit risk. This conversation came up as part of the review with the auditors on what kind of risk management we have in that area. And I'm obligated with Mike to come back to a group of board members after budgets are squarely behind us to kind of review practices and procedures in that arena. So that's been our primary focus, is designing systems and processes and procedures, of which many of you are part of, to just preclude the opportunity that existed in Hardwick or some of these other areas.
Yeah.
But we'll revisit the coverage and the amounts. Good question. I think it's something we'll take up the next time we update and revise.
Every time we go out and do our review, which is July 1, we're just starting the process now. We go out and we get alternative bids, but we do provide optional quotes like this, like higher limits on earthquake, and we do, it's a cost-benefit analysis, and budgets where they are, we have to make those hard decisions that, this year we cut the earthquake limit just to try to keep within budgets. It's something we spend quite a bit of time on, providing alternative quotes and trying to figure out the best premium for the best value for the coverage.
Could I take you back to the computer coverage? And is this the blanket hardware coverage is obviously for the computers? And I've got to think we have more than $250,000 worth of computers just in CVU alone.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. What this is covering for is very unique coverages within computers, like electrical arcing, that you don't have for table chairs. So if you had a fire, if it was a fire, you'd have the $130 million that would apply to everything, including computers. If it's one of those unique coverages, like electrical storm that zaps, the server, that's where the $250,000 comes in, because that's unique to computers. You don't need that coverage for desk, tables, chairs, books, things like that.
And we think that's adequate for, CVU is has the most hardware of any of the schools. Is that adequate for what we have?
Yes, in the sense that it's unlikely, our conversations would say it's unlikely that a catastrophic event that destroys all computers is going to hit 3 of our 5 schools all at the same time. And if such an event does occur, we've got far bigger issues than just the computers that just left us. So that's kind of the balance we look at, David, when we kind of work the numbers is, okay.
No, that's a good question. We then get into general liability, which is the biggest exposure for a school. It's bodily injury that occurs to a student, whether it's, well, we've had those type of claims, as we all know. So that's what we have in this is The general liability, it's $1 million for any one claim, and then we have an umbrella that goes on top of that. So for any one bodily injury that occurs to a student, we have $11 million in total for any one occurrence. And that's, when we sit and talk about limits, that's one of the things that we look at. What is the type of suits that occur here in Vermont? And we look at that number. Is $11 million, it's a very difficult question. Is $11 million enough? Most cases, it's. What's that?
So far, yes.
So far, exactly. But it's, so anyways, that's certainly something that we look at every year.
Is that what the buses would fall under?
Yeah, that's different. That's under the auto, which is the same limits, though. On the next
Okay.
page, we get into the auto, which is $1
Okay.
million.
Which would cover our
And
buses.
we have an umbrella that goes over that. So that also has 11 million for any one occurrence. So if we move on to the last page, I guess you don't have these handouts, but
Does anybody need the handouts? Or did you're all looking at your?
right on the computer. Fantastic. The last couple coverages, we've got what's called school board legal liability, which is protecting all you folks. It's protecting the teachers if they get sued for wrongful instruction. It also covers employment practices liability if someone in the school district is sued for discrimination due to race, color, creed, hiring practices, sexual harassment. That's all under this policy. It's called employment practices liability as well as school board legal liability. And then we've already talked about the auto, and then the last part that's, the biggest premium that we look at every year and spend probably the most amount of time on the risk management is the workers' comp, which is, it's about 65% of the school district's premium. So it's expensive, and it's something that we spend time, we do quarterly reviews with Cindy and Bob going through, here are the claims that have occurred, and we just go through what caused them, what school district was it at, what can we do? Is there anything that we could have done to prevent these claims? And then we try to do training. We've done some ergonomic inspections at the cafeterias. I think we did it at Shelburne Community School, and we did it at I think we did Charlotte Elementary as well, just to make sure that the cafeterias are set up properly for the employees there, because we've had some claim activity there. So that's what we spend time. We've done defensive driving courses with the drivers. We've done that 2 out of the last 3 years. And now we're talking probably over the next few months that we're going to do some training for the supervisors, and it's food service. It'll be, I think, maintenance, plant, and probably facility. Yeah, I think facilities, transportation, food service. And again, it's all in the hopes of preventing claims, because obviously claims drives premium, and the goal is to keep the premiums down as best we can. And as I mentioned earlier, we're already starting on this year's renewal, and we'll be getting quotes. We're with Trident Insurance Company, which insures significant number of the school districts here in Vermont, as well as municipalities. But we'll get alternative quotes from Peerless, Hanover, and Travelers as well. And then on workers' comp, there's unique carriers that just insure workers' comp, so we'll get quotes from AmTrust and Hartford on the workers' comp as well. So that's part of what we do over the next 4 to 5 months.
It's the most complex segment of your risk management coverage. It is clearly the most expensive. The incidents underneath that umbrella range all the way from slips and falls on the way into work for all employees to motion ergonomic kind of injuries to employees who are exposed to that kind of risk, to very serious accidents that occur with our employees in unfortunate circumstances. So it requires, that segment of the pool requires the most amount of attention relative to Elaine and her leadership team to keep us as free of all that as we can. The coverage, the premiums are based on state rates, incident rates looking backwards for 3 years.
Yeah.
And then the profitability or lack thereof to a carrier offering insurance to this SU. 10 years ago, it was almost impossible to place the workman's comp because of the terrible picture looking backwards. That has changed, and the rates have come down as a result, but it is still a costly segment of what we do and needs a lot of attention to do it right.
Yeah, and we put in the attachment sort of the trend of where the claims have gone, so you can sort of see where we trended the right direction due to all this work and the focus that Bob, Cindy, and ourselves have put into this, because it does take focus, and so far this year, we've had a good year, and it's, accidents occur, and that's why you have workers' comp. There's no avoiding it. That's why you have workers' comp. But the ones that are preventable, some of it's just a cultural thing. It's just getting people to think twice before they do something they really shouldn't. But it's been effective, so hopefully we're going to keep up this good success.
The other anecdotal comment I'll offer is when Cindy and I got here, I would describe the situation as you had numerous employees in the organization who they and their doctors understood workman's comp far better than anybody here in this organization. And that was kind of the setting that we walked into. It was extremely favorable and flexible to employees indicating they needed coverage and getting that coverage. We've since done the right thing relative to employees, but it tightened up the process so that we get notified of their injury at the front end of the process, not after the fact kind of thing. But just anecdotally, that's what we waltzed into about 10 years ago. Questions of the two of us?
I realize that, I assume it's Hickok and Boardman puts out, this stuff out to bid to multiple carriers every year. How often do we put this out for an RFP for, different agencies?
There are 2 or 3 people offering this sort of management of coverage to schools across the state. One of them is the multi-line pool within Bisbee. We look at alternate avenues providing this coverage about every 2 or 3 years. If you ask Tammy Anthony in my office, she'd prefer we do it every 5 or 6 years because she has to start in January developing an application that's about 4 inches thick to provide all the information necessary for someone else to look at your coverage. But Russ, to that point, we go out and kick the tires and see that we're placed correctly. I think Mike's been with us and Hickok and Boardman since, in some form of the coverage, way back.
Yeah.
But
we took over the workers' comp, I think, when there were real problems is when
Right.
we came in. And that's really where our specialization is. We have a risk management team, Green Mountain Safety Consulting, that really comes in and does a lot of this training, this overview of the claims management, because the insurance companies, they have so many claims they're managing that they sometimes lose the focus. So that's really where we're spending our time, is managing the claims and the loss prevention.
yes, Jill.
We may be managing our claims much more effectively, but is there any room for training? I don't know where the claims are. I mean, you said maybe a slip, you can help that a bit, but is there room for training to improve injuries? I don't know what they are, and that's all.
Yeah, most
Right.
definitely. You did. That's in essence what we spent the last 2 hours conversing with amongst the 3 of us. The picture I'd leave with you is you have a very, very complex organization of employees doing a lot of very different things. And the significant pools of risk from injuries range from paras, lifting or moving or working with students being injured, to bus drivers who getting in and out of buses seem to find the narrow patch of ice that's available somewhere in the state to then step on. To cafeteria workers, so it's difficult. If you looked at the list of accidents in the last 12 months, it's not going to lend itself to statistical analysis and selection of. So we go broader, we go 3 or 4 years, and then try and target the groups that might benefit from a bit of training or a bit of pause before they step into the work environment again. But it's difficult because they're all a little different.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you next year, about the same time.
It's always helpful to be reminded of how many people work in the organization. I mean, this is a huge organization with so many different variables.
What is that number?
Thank
We
you.
do between 1,500 and 2,100 W-2s every year.
That's a lot of W-2s.
Yes, it is. We have a stuffing party every year.
And what is it, a $60 to $70 million organization?
A little higher than that now with this round of budgets that you've just done.
Okay. Over 70. It's an over $70 million organization with 1,500 employees.
Right.
That's a big organization. Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
5.2, the central office leadership team report. Elaine?
I'm just going to start to, tag on to this last presentation that it does happen. It's happened a couple times since I've been here that Cindy and Bob come in and say, we need to bring this to the attention of our administrators because they have noticed a pattern. Or they've noticed something that they think it would make a difference if our administrators did. So I just want to acknowledge that they are doing something at a different grain size looking, and then we do bring it to the administrators, just to, sometimes there's not a fix, but just like to have an awareness. Make sure that you don't expect or ask people to lift these boxes or that kind of thing. So I think that's important to acknowledge. The report, the COLT report, you'll notice there's a piece on your organization and my organization's agenda on public education. A while back, there was a press conference, and tonight, at your local board meetings, you will receive, every one of us has a little packet. The VSBA has made copies for all of you of the policy work, the agenda on public education, so you'll be getting that. I hope that you had a chance to look at the Green Mountain Star graphic. That is the commissioner's required actions for those schools that are identified as a result of the No Child Left Behind Act. And
This one?
that one, it's different than what it was, and there's a different level of interface with the DOE, so we're AOE now. So I hope you'll take a look at that to see how we've made sense of it for ourselves so that it ties into our existing structures, our action planning structure, for instance. And then when we get to a CSSU plan, the CSSU plan is based on what we know of the plans of all of the other schools. So that's in there. Legislative update. Stuff is happening fast at the legislature. So this was all true when I put it in here last week. I'm not sure where they are with all of this now, and I actually haven't heard anything this week, but I think the agency fee is a piece, and I know that some of you have, contacted your legislators about that.
Russ, and if anyone else is interested, talk to Russ and Jean, who have made connections.
Haven't heard anything more about the school lunch thing, although I hear that there's some support for that, and that would be to put money towards making anybody who's getting reduced lunch, that would be a free lunch.
I thought that we'd already done that. Did we do that school by school? I could have sworn in Williston it was all.
I think you did do it in
You have
Williston.
an excellent memory. All schools of the SU have already done that. So the practice is in place. What it'll mean when they pass the law is you'll get an
Funding
additional.
for it.
Yeah, you'll get funding for it.
Nice.
It's not a large dollar value, but it does touch and target kids who are at risk and known to be at risk. So it's the best $5 you've spent. Well, maybe it's more than 5.
Flexible pathways, that's dual enrollment and online courses, and whereas last year that was kind of narrowly defined and people were arguing about it, it seems like there's more support for what the legislature is trying to do around that. Pre-K legislation, holy cow, I mean, that's everywhere, right? Everybody is supporting pre-K legislation, and I think that we're poised. Megan and I just had a conversation, not even related to this, about what do we do in our supervisory union to provide supports to our families before they even get to school. So I think that we're in a good place vis-a-vis what the possible legislation would be. And there could be a little bit of money that would come with that, too. I mean, they're talking about, one of the things they're talking about is to grant an exception to the way they do ADM for everything else and have that ADM count fully in the first year. So as you enroll students, you get the money right away. So, and to tweak, right now, I think we get .46, and they're talking about tweaking it to .50. So you get half an ADM for that. Concussions, I don't know where that is, but I know that before I typed this up last week, just before that, they were talking about every single athletic event, and people were, saying that's not even doable. We won't even be having sports teams. So that's now contact sports to have somebody there. And there's a whole piece around education quality standards here. That, again, not sure exactly where that is. Although if you look at the statewide calendar one, tomorrow two superintendents, the executive director of the VSA are meeting, and myself are meeting with House Ed Chair, Senate Ed Chair, and the governor's education liaison to talk about the school calendar that we've talked about here. So stay tuned. I hope you had a chance to read Molly's piece on wretches and jabberers, because I think she did a really nice job of capturing it, and it really was a very, very powerful event. And Molly, maybe you want to give everybody an update on where are we vis-a-vis the Common Core, and will we be ready?
Good question. No,
Does it look like we're going to be ready?
I said Megan wrote the Wretches and Jabberers piece.
Did I say Molly?
That's okay.
Yes, sorry about
So I
that,
just
you
wanted
guys.
to know that
Thank
we
you.
collaborated to bring
Yes.
Wretches and Jabberers to everybody, and Megan wrote it up. I wrote a little bit about what has happened our first year of rolling out the Common Core for everybody. Pulling out all the stops, making sure people knew how to read the document, understand where it came from, why we have it, and where we're going. So we had 5 critically important in-service days this year, and I don't think we could do our work with Common Core because it is such a massive undertaking without that. So we'll be working on a calendar in the future related to the upcoming in-service days for next year. But in those times, we did a couple things that I think are unique to the rollout of Common Core here in the SU. One is that we brought about our own leadership. So yes, I brought in some presenters that helped to augment this, but we also trained our own teacher leaders and coordinators to help facilitate our Common Core work. So I worked with them over the summer, and then we planned the workshops that took place in service time. So it was great for teachers to see their fellow teachers leading them and so invested and committed to the core. I think that really helped for buy-in. But that was unique and terrific, and we will keep doing that. And another feature was part of the in-service work we did was presenting of information, shifts in how you teach and what you teach. And then another component was providing teacher collaboration time to then look at their units of study in the areas they just learned about and tweak them or throw them away and start again so that they can gradually build a repertoire of aligned units of study. So in teams throughout the SU, K-12, people were working after their workshops on doing that, and we've developed some interactive collaborative sites in Google where people now are posting these refined units so that you're a first grade teacher and you're about to do frogs and metamorphosis, you can first, before you go and develop it yourself, you go and look on there, see if anyone else has preceded you, and you grab it. So we're working very collaboratively, and we hope to continue that model. The feedback about that teacher, it was facilitated teacher work. So we had people working with groups to work on their new lessons, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Oh, thank goodness we have time to do this. Another feature was that our special educators, our SLPs, a variety of people who sometimes have in service time doing other things were integrated into the teams who worked on these aligned units, and that too got a lot of praise from those who participated, well, from everybody who participated. So you can see I laid out for you what has been our Common Core plan in this little grid for you ever since Vermont adopted the core. And we're marching along. So 12, 13, we began to really investigate the standards and implement those. People's KUDs and lesson plans that they designed, they're now implementing in their classrooms. And the direction to them was, when you work on this unit, it should be something you're going to be doing in the next few months. So implementation is happening. Next year we'll do the same thing, because we've gone deep. We've gone the mile deep and the inch wide in terms of how many standards we have covered. And so next year we'll bite off some more, but our approach to this is to go deep with full understanding as we go. And we'll continue in 14, 15, and you know, spring of 2015 will be the first SBAC. I think we're getting there.
Yeah, I think it's great work. And finally, the last thing we've got for you, but I'll propose is the annual report. So I'll just start asking this one.
Anything else, Elaine? No, that's it. Okay, great. Thank you, Elaine.
You're welcome.
Bob, did you want to do we're at 5.3, the second quarter financial management report.
The report is, this quarter's report is in your packet. I'm willing to entertain questions you might have on the report.
Questions for Bob?
Transportation's still challenging, but not worse, not any worse. Which is continuing to be worse.
Half better than last year. The fuel thing seems to be managed. The repairs of your fleet is still a challenge to live within the budgeted number that was corrected in 13-14, but we were living within 12-13. We haven't given up on it, but
But it hasn't gotten worse than what we anticipated
Correct.
for next year. Okay.
Other questions for Bob?
I included an additional piece on connecting youth and access CVU, just in case you're wondering how those two little segments off to the side are doing.
Yeah, that's helpful to have that in there. Really appreciate it. It's like having the food service in the local. It's just really helpful to have that extra information.
I'll let Eddie and Duncan know that. They're just like food service.
It's all
There's so many
important.
parallels.
All important stuff. Thank you. Okay, so let's
Thanks.
move to 5.4 Administrative Comp Review Committee update. This will be brief. There's really nothing new since we met last, and I'm thinking the last time we talked about this was at our budget meeting in January. And where we are is Elaine has been meeting with administrators just to review it with them, get some feedback. We have some work to do as far as categories and so forth, and developing policy. What we're going to do is pull the committee together again. It'll probably happen late March, April timeframe, and then we'll come back to the board. But what we'll probably do meanwhile is maybe do some work online to start working towards developing policy implementation protocol of how we use the report and the tools that this committee has developed. And Russ, did you want to add anything to this? How about other committee members? Joan, Jean, Kevin, Lynn, Bob? And Lynn has agreed to stay with the committee until we finish our work, so thank you,
That could
Lynn.
be years, Lynn.
So we'll come back to you on this one.
She'll negotiate service time.
Free dinner when you show up.
Veggie.
Okay. Any questions for anybody? No. Okay, 5.5, food service, ad hoc committee update, and Paul was on that?
Yep, I have a brief update. The committee has met twice, but the first meeting, only about half the people made it. Bob gave us great information out of the gates, considering the somewhat loose verbiage that came from the meeting when the committee was charged. Bob took that verbiage and really ran with it. I too will stick around and be on this committee for a little bit, and I'll come back in April. But Bob shared a book with the committee members, Free for All, Fixing School Food in America. And it reminds me that I'm not too sure everyone thinks that food service in Chittenden South is broken. So fixing is sort of a verb there that isn't being bandied about by this committee. The idea that Bob works with food service directors who bring different talents to the table. He also works with different boards who bring different demands to the table. And this, the variety, and I'm not trying to change that. This committee's not out to fix anything, but it's acknowledging that, that, for instance, some boards have a higher tolerance for subsidizing food service than other boards. Some boards plan on the subsidy. Others prefer not to plan on the subsidy and deal with it only if it is needed. So trying to bring those things into just clarity, not trying to step into the supervision structure by any means. Bob meets with food service directors on a regular basis, and the best work is probably taking place among themselves. But there are some neat opportunities, and I think if there was any, I don't want to say doubt, but kind of questioning, so why are we getting together? Those were erased pretty quickly. People are like, wow, oh gosh, this makes sense. This merits taking a look at some things. So some things we'll be looking at soon. Participation rates, the variety of costs, food and labor costs within each program. Supposedly, people are being dealt the same set of ingredients on how to run an operation, but there's some real differences from district to district. And we also want to stop in at some cafeterias, and we will be back in April.
And thank you for continuing with that work as well, Paul. Does anyone have questions for Paul?
Is that committee also looking broader than that? You know, how to have the food service part of kids' education and including composting and gardens, and or is it more just the money side of?
I was about to say yes, but then as you gave examples, I started to say no. Because, and the yes side of my answer would be, your Charlotte representative to that committee was talking about food served in a setting that may or may not be conducive to, it sounds like even digestion, let alone education.
Yeah.
But far, I don't think you're going to get a committee to try to figure out how to, paint your walls or anything. So all composting, local stuff like that is part of a big themes. No promises though, because I think it pulls in so many directions. Just one person's perspective on that.
Are you guys looking at whether to continue with all of the separate budgets as we do now, or whether this should become a supervisory union thing, perhaps similar to transportation, and whether all schools should continue cooking meals every day in their building, or whether there's
Yep, we
more
haven't made it
effective
that
ways.
far, to be perfectly honest, as far as are we looking, no, not yet. But the notion of internal outsourcing, for instance, especially where you've got some kitchens so closely located in the same town. However, I take great caution in talking about it, because I don't want anybody in any of their current jobs thinking they're being changed or eliminated. But it certainly seems reasonable to take a look at, should food be cooked in every kitchen? Might it be served in some and cooked in others? So But then the notion of following the transportation model for budgeting, that hasn't even popped up on the radar screen yet.
It just, I think we've had conversations in the past where a certain school, I think we're sitting in it at the moment, tends to run surpluses every year, and you run, and I think you guys have said, we keep lowering prices and we keep running a surplus, and I don't think that the intent is to run it as a profit center. And we have K-8 schools every year that run a deficit, and arguably it's all the same families, at some point through the system. So,
So two things. I've drunk the Kool-Aid that says K-8 is so different than high school, and that they're just the opportunities to get into the high school student's wallet is so different than the K through 8 student. When I think of the transportation model, I'm reminded of the fact that local boards have different expectations of financial results of their food service operations. So I think unless that were a bit more homogenized, it'd be a challenge to put it into a central operational budget, considering that each part of that has such different expectations of what good results would be. But things we'll definitely be talking about and getting back to you in April.
Thank you, Paul. And if anyone has questions or comments, they should direct them to Paul?
Sure.
Or me.
Or Bob? Okay. So move on to 5.6 outcomes, and
I can just give a brief summary of where we are.
yep, where we are. Yep.
So the committee, the board's committee, developed its near final version of outcomes, waiting to see what the administrators are going to be recommending for indicators. The large administrative team, all of the principals and central office team have worked with developing that, generating that list of indicators twice now. At 2 of our meetings, we've really focused on that. And just this week, Molly, Megan, and I took that work and spent half a day drilling down. So I will be bringing the work that we've done, our latest work, to the board chairs on Friday to get input, and we'll go back to the administrators. We'll do that a few more times, and then we're hoping to have it back to the committee, the outcomes committee, by April or May, so that for the retreat, we'd be able to adopt.
Okay. Okay, so we'll hear more about this.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Can we move on? Okay, 5.7 negotiations, just a brief update of where we are. Was a small committee, started out with a couple board members, a couple faculty members. I was on it, Lorna Jemerson, Bob joined us last night. So this committee's met 3 times. Faculty members, association reps, and Cindy's been part of this, helping facilitate some of this. So the purpose of this small committee is to do some pre-planning and then come to the boards with a recommendation for how to proceed with negotiations, what our recommendation for how that structure will be. And just to give you a heads up of likely recommendations, so you can start thinking about it at your local level. One would be to have, a likely recommendation will be to have smaller negotiating teams with no more than 1 rep from each board. And for the association, 1 rep from each building. Another likely recommendation will be to have joint training, and our goal for both negotiating teams, and our goal is to have 2 joint training sessions occur hopefully by the end of April and not later than the end of May, so that teams could go back and do whatever homework they might need to do and then be ready to start up again in the fall after the September start of school gets settled down. That means to be able to do that, and again, these are likely recommendations, so the committee hasn't finished its work and come out with a formal recommendation. I'm just giving you a heads up. What that would mean to move forward in this direction would mean individual boards would need to identify their negotiating team rep by April. let's say April, so that they could be part of a joint training that would occur. The other piece that there's very strong consensus on, I would say, is to have a schedule laid out throughout the next year. And so far for our committee, Tuesdays have worked very well, and we actually have meetings that are laid out through the end of May on Tuesdays, and it will likely mean that the recommendation will likely be that we settle on a day of the week throughout next year, and it may go to June, but the heavy part of the work would likely occur in the fall. And talking with Elaine earlier about, conflicting with other meetings that happen within the SU and so forth, it's something they need to figure out in central office, but a likely proposal might be the second and fourth Tuesday of the month. So as people are thinking about, as boards are thinking about representation and so forth, if someone can't meet that commitment, they don't want to put themselves forward as a consideration, because really one of the goals is to just lay out the schedule through the next year, be able to identify ahead of time when mediators would be part of the process, even before there's a recognized need, but just get people's schedule down so that people have a good sense of how the year would play out.
Do you want to say why that's important?
Well, just for planning.
It just seemed like the other years it's been an area of frustration when you're trying to get a meeting together and it's, I'm not available. And then it also extends the schedule because by the time you do get everybody together, it's 6 weeks instead of 2.
We tended not to schedule the next meeting until you're sitting there in a meeting that perhaps didn't go that well. And then everybody's trying to figure out when can we next meet again, and oftentimes it did stretch out much longer than desirable, and frankly raised a concern, at least on some board members' part, myself included. Was there intention to delay the process? And so you get these suspicions of who, what's the motivation and all of that.
Yeah.
So I think a schedule that's laid out in advance that says we're going to do this removes the opportunity to have those those issues.
Yeah.
So there's a better atmosphere, hopefully, for the
Yeah.
negotiations.
Yeah, that's good description, thank you. And then one of the things that we're going to hopefully do by March is pull together our ground rules, be able to bring those to the association and the board, the various constituencies, and that would include things like communications, how do we go about our communications, blah, 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 laying it all out there. So without going deeper into that right now, we just wanted to give you a heads up and have you start thinking about it, okay?
So is there any discussion about considering having open negotiations or open meetings for negotiations?
We're not there.
Okay, so that would be at the ground rule level?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this committee that's meeting now is, it's a pre-planning. Then we'll identify who the reps are from the two teams, and it may be the same group. It may be a couple more people added. It will likely be a couple more people added. And then we'll check in with boards with our recommendation and hopefully have boards agree to it. And hopefully association reps, they all agree to it. And so this committee does its work. We identify our reps. We have 2 sessions of training, hopefully. That would be part of the recommendation. And then take it from there. Is that good? Okay. Thank you. Well, 6.0, 6.1 policy review, we do not have any. Thank you. And 6.2 legislative advocacy. This is on the agenda just as a reminder that we have a few people who've committed or who've self-identified to help participate with planning for a legislative breakfast. And I have in my notes Kathy, Josh, Bob, Kristen, and me. And we'll probably communicate by email and maybe ask Joan for some recommendations of when it would be a good time to have a legislative breakfast. So, Joan, when you have your calendar,
I would look at Elaine's calendar and folks here, and we've got a couple Mondays. I would do it the last of March maybe, but first 2 or 3 of April. 2 of April is it? And we don't have a chamber breakfast at all in April. March is our last one.
okay,
And so those 2 or 3 Mondays are open.
okay,
There's nothing else scheduled, but they will get scheduled, so a save the date is good.
okay. So we'll do some calendar work behind the
Yeah,
scenes.
And
Okay,
I'll look, I didn't bring mine,
Okay,
but
I'll
I'll
include
double check
you
that
on
my
that.
words are accurate.
okay. So we haven't lost sight of that. So as you're thinking about what's going on in the legislature right now, and, what we would want to bring to the table for that. In 7.0, action matters, we have 7.1, we need to schedule a retreat date, and the recommendation is Friday, May 31st. And
Locals in the morning, CSSU in the afternoon,
like we
lunch
did
for
last
everyone.
year. So let's entertain a motion to identify Friday, May 31st as our retreat date. Is there a motion?
So moved.
In a second? Further discussion? Ready for a vote? Okay, all those in favor of Friday, May 31st as our retreat date, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstains? Okay, thank you.
Abstain from that.
Consent agenda, need a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, say aye. We
So
didn't pull
moved.
anything out. In a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. We've got our next meeting dates. You can read as well as I can. And let's move to 10.0, we have executive session. We don't need to do that. We'll probably have an update in March.
Okay.
So we can skip over 10.0, and then 11.0, common topic. So Elaine is going to introduce our common topic for us. So, as Elaine is welcoming our guests, this is just a reminder that this is on our agenda as an education piece for the board. We just need to be updated about what's out there for educational, different ways of delivery and so forth. And so this is part of that. So, Elaine?
So I just want to start by thanking Tim Williams, who is the one who connected me with Jamie Northrup. And about 2 days after he connected me with Jamie, there was a splash in the Burlington Free Press, a splash on TV, and I had already had my board chair meeting, and I thought, like, wow, they must really think that, like, I have some kind of line too. That was really Tim who had said, maybe this would be a good common topic, and I was just starting to communicate with Jamie. Delighted to have him here. World language is an important topic in all of our schools, K-8 and high school. Different ways of learning, different ways to access the learning, as we talked about, the legislature is talking about dual enrollment and online learning. Here's something to think about, and Middlebury certainly is known for their language program. So we're delighted to have you here. Thank you very much, Jamie. So what we're thinking is, presentation, and then, like 25 minutes of a presentation, and then, another 20 minutes of questions, answers, discussion would be great.
Sure.
And our goal is
Thank
to
you.
finish by 6:45 if we're watching the clock, just to give us time.
Okay, I talk very fast. Just having a
In which language? Is it supposed to?
What language?
What language do you want to speak in? Stand close to this mic here. Okay. So thanks very much, Elaine, and sorry I'm late. You know, I grew up in Peacham, and I often forget that driving a 35-minute drive often takes 55 to get stuck behind someone who goes slow. In the big city. In the big city. Okay, so I work for Middlebury Interactive Languages. Middlebury Interactive Languages is a company that was started 2.5 years ago as a joint partnership between Middlebury College and a company out of Herndon, Virginia called K-12 Inc. And they're the largest provider of online courseware to the, students around the country. We were formed with the mission to provide greater access to world language courses to the students in the United States. And we've been building, over the last 2.5 years, a portfolio of courses that are based on Middlebury College's pedagogy, the courses that they deliver in the summer in that program for college students, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. We have taken that base of that pedagogy, translated it, no pun intended, into an online curriculum that can be delivered virtually. It can be delivered in a variety of different methods around the country, and we're doing that as we speak over in and around schools around the U.S. We provide a variety of different types of courses for students. What I'm going to talk specifically about today is our online curriculum that we've developed, but we run a summer language program, actually one of them in Poultney, Vermont, at Green Mountain College, where we bring students that's modeled identically after the Middlebury College summer language program. We bring students for 4 weeks. They sign a pledge saying they're only going to speak only going to speak the language they're studying for the course of study, and they do that, and they get about a year's worth of language acquisition during that time period. We also run day programs for that. And then again, like I said, I'll talk about the interactive courses that we've built. We also provide teachers. So one of the things that often is a misconception about online education is that it's there to replace teachers. All of our courses have some teacher component to it, whether it's a blended model, so where the school's teachers are delivering the curriculum that we've developed in either a full curriculum or a supplemental fashion, or where we're providing a virtual teacher in those instances where school districts don't have the teachers or teachers in the languages that we offer, for example, Chinese or Latin or something of that nature. And we also do professional development around that type of acquisition, both the Middlebury pedagogy, how to teach in an immersive environment, as well as how to use our curriculum to better educate students in world languages. And we also offer some assessment solutions that sort of prove efficacy of our program. That's an independent third-party assessment vehicle. This is going to be a little bit hard to see. How many of you heard the release or read the news article about what we're doing for the state of Vermont and for school districts there? Did anyone hear about that? It happened about 3 or 4 weeks ago. We had the governor down at our space. Show of hands just quickly. So, okay, so 1 or 2, 3 people who have heard about that. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes.
They told me to stand near the mic. So.
Sorry.
That's okay. What I'm here specifically to talk to you tonight about is that particular world language initiative that's being funded primarily through discounting that we're doing at Middlebury Interactive, as well as the college is providing some dollars to put against the courses as well as the professional development. That is specific to the high school curriculum, and I can talk a little bit about it and then answer questions about that. But I did want to show we offer a really comprehensive portfolio of courses from K to 12. What you're seeing here is we've got 3 levels of courses: our exposure, competency, and fluency. Exposure is our elementary school course. Courses, they're focused really on getting students familiar with the idea of a second language. It's a very interactive, sort of fun, engaging online curriculum that introduces the language in a fun way, starts to get students familiar with that idea of a second language and culture, and allows students to access that material. Our competency courses, which run from grades 6 through 12, are really about mastery of skills, a very traditional approach in terms of how they introduce grammar and vocabulary, very straightforward way. It's very straightforward in how it progresses through the different learning skills, and again, very comfortable for students as well as teachers to deliver in those courses. And then the fluency courses, which are the high school level courses, those are really based on what the best of what we know from the Middlebury College faculty that have helped build our courses. Much more immersive, a lot of authentic material. We shot video around the world at different locations, different cities in Spain and Argentina for our Spanish program, in Senegal, in Montreal, and in France for our French program, China, obviously, for our Chinese program, where it builds on that library of interactive video to really introduce the students to an immersive environment within the course. So just a very different type of course, and I'm happy to answer questions specific to that, and you know, if teachers are interested in getting some access to that, I can also provide that as well. So let me just quickly stop there. Any quick questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious, I mean, you read all the literature and it says the best time to get kids involved in world language is when they're little.
Yep, absolutely.
So you're starting in grade 3. Is there a reason you don't do K2?
There is, and actually we for what's not on here and what will be introduced this fall is we have a K2 Spanish program, and we're building a K2 Chinese program. This portfolio of, I think it's 36 courses, represents a significant amount of development dollars. Some of them are legacy courses that we've improved since the formation of Middlebury Interactive, and that portfolio just didn't exist. Additionally, the challenge in introducing language courses in elementary schools is great, where there are not the same level of requirements as you would have at a high school, where there's maybe a graduation requirement for a world language. Length of day, I mean, in Addison County, I live in the county that I live in, there's 3 elementary schools, they have an hour-and-a-half length of day difference. So just, there is not as much of a market for that elementary school at this point, although we are beginning to build that stuff out. Yeah, go ahead.
I noticed AP.
Yep.
There's some discussion about AP and colleges accepting AP now. Are you going to continue to offer AP?
Yeah, in the immediate future, yeah, we are going to continue to offer AP. I mean, the AP language courses have really, or the tests actually, have really changed significantly in the last couple of years. They no longer are literature-based, they're more culture and communication-based. So we've sort of adapted to what the College Board has said as the AP, but we're not seeing a real move away from that in terms of students wanting to continue to take those. Whether they can use it for college credit or not doesn't impact us as much as it is students are interested in that and continue to take it. So we will continue to offer that, especially at the French and the Spanish level. Just the numbers are greater. I mean, once you get into Chinese and Latin and some of those other languages, the number of students actually taking those AP exams is pretty small. But for French and Spanish, I think we'll definitely continue that in the future and make the necessary adaptations. Our French AP course is all new this year, and our Spanish is being updated for the new AP test that's being rolled out for this next year. Other questions on some of this stuff? Okay. So we offer, we have about 180,000 students around the country taking our courses. I sort of joke around. I mean, I'm sure you all have had some experience with online learning within CVU, but there's probably as many implementations as there are students. So we offer a very flexible learning management system and database to deliver our courses that allow it to really be adapted to the type of implementation really at the student or teacher level. So whether the teacher is using it in a face-to-face environment as the primary curriculum or as a supplemental, we're able to help the teachers become familiar with the content through our professional development, as well as familiar with the technology that's driving it, the grade book and the other things that sort of the back-end learning management system that allow them to deliver that, all the way up to a fully online, one student virtually located with one student in front of a computer with a virtual teacher located somewhere in a different part of the country that will be certified in the state where they deliver the course, but is virtually located and delivering the entire experience in an online environment. And then sort of everything in between. I mean, blended means as many different things as people want to make definitions for it, and we've had a lot of experience with that, from delivering it to on select days during the week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are online, and then Thursday, Friday are with the teacher, or an after-school program, Gifted and Talented. I mean, a lot of different types of implementations that we've used, and I really think the hallmark of what we've developed, other than the pedagogy and sort of the drive and the academic piece from Middlebury College, is the flexibility of the course and how it can be used. So let me get into some specifics about the World Language Initiative. What we've worked out with the college as one of the partners that form Middlebury Interactive is that we've worked out a opportunity for 30 Vermont secondary schools. And again, there's going to be some loose definitions of this, and I think that that's an okay thing. I mean, we're not defining, we're not just saying just 9th through 12th. We're opening up to secondary schools. The college has put up some funding to take the first 30 secondary schools to have access to our world language portfolio. Now, if it's and sort of the way I've sort of defined this, and someone had the foresight to make me the architect of this, which may have been a bad idea, is to allow, if there's a K through, we do it by site, so we do our pricing by building. And so if there's a building that has K through 12, then we'll give access to the portfolio. But really, the main idea is to get high schools to adopt some of our courses, because we really believe, especially at the fluency level, we've created some of the best stuff out there in terms of pedagogy and world language. So that's sort of the beginning of the World Language Initiative. That comes with some professional development. It comes with a full day session for language teachers to learn about the immersion pedagogy as well as the world language piece or the technology that we offer our courses on, as well as professional development as a follow-up. So once they've actually started delivering the courses to students, usually they need a refresher on, okay, how do I make the grade book work? And this kid submitted something, but I know that they did this, and so I need to change this. And so some additional follow-up. And that's all part of what we do when we sell our courses, is we provide that professional development for teachers. And the total cost of this is $11,750, but what the cost that comes to each individual site is only $6,000, and the college has offset the other money. They've paid for $3,000 of the content fee as well as $2,750 for the professional development fee, and they've done that they've done a 4-year commitment for that. Now, that's not to say schools need to sign up for 4 years, but each year we'll look at each 30 schools, or we have 30 spots open, and we'll sort of rank that. If 25 schools sign up for the 4-year commitment, then there's only 5 spots left each additional year. So there's some specifics around that I'm happy to answer some more questions on. And that's actually it. So again, like I said, I talked very fast. So I blew through that. And I'm sorry, I went through a lot of really high-level material about what we do. I think there's much more, it's much easier to answer some specific questions around world language. I can answer, I've been with the company for now 2.5 years since it started. I was at the language schools prior to that. So I have a very, sometimes too deep of a knowledge of what our courses are like and what they've been built as. But go ahead.
Okay, so to that end, can we just take a basic step back?
Sure.
Is the whole purpose of your organization an offshoot of the college in an effort to spur world languages in public education?
So our mission, as it's been laid out, is to provide greater access to high-quality world language courses to any student in the United States. I think what happened was, to step back again, sort of the formation of this idea 5 years ago, or 6 years ago now, the college started their summer language program for high school students. It was actually started at St. Michael's, and it's since migrated to Green Mountain College. During the course of the development of that program, specifically for, I think it was rising 8th graders through graduating seniors, we heard a lot from parents that this is great. We came and took Arabic, we came and took Chinese. My kid got a ton of information, a ton of acquisition. What do we do when we go back to our school that doesn't have Chinese or doesn't have French or Spanish? So it was sort of that conversation that we were having with high school age parents, or parents of high school age students, as well as when Ron Leibowitz went down to Washington, D.C. when George Bush was president. He called together a group of college presidents and said, we have a lack of a strategic language reserve. And so it really was those two events that started us, Middlebury College, and I say us, I don't work there anymore, but started Middlebury College down the path of thinking about how to develop additional access for students that would be able to gain more language than once they got to college. So we all know, as someone mentioned before, the younger the better in terms of language acquisition. And they also knew they wanted to deliver it online. I think their foresight about knowing that they knew language pedagogy extremely well, but not knowing a lot about how to deliver things into schools online, they partnered with K-12 Inc., which is very good at that. I mean, they have a very long history they're a company about 11 years old, of delivering curriculum into schools. And so they partnered with them for their distribution and their technical knowledge about how to deliver that course material. So yes, that's a very long-winded way of saying, yeah, we wanted to provide greater access for those courses for students around the country.
Okay, so if I'll skip Spanish and French, because most schools have that, but let's say German.
Yep.
If CVU, I don't know, but if they don't have a German teacher, are you suggesting that we can still teach German here through your program without actually? Okay, now, so that is confusing to me. So that really just becomes an online course, and the student has access to German language learning online via this if CVU. So
yes.
If you purchase the program, does it come with multiple languages in the portfolio?
So the way that we've offered, specifically around the World Language Initiative that we're doing in Vermont, if CVU were to sign up, for example, for the building, so for this high school, you would get access for every student in your building to any language in the portfolio. So now, the ability for the student to get credit for it would at the high school level depends on a certified teacher validating the work that they do in the language. So if there was not a German teacher, for example, in CVU, our teacher, certified in the state of Vermont, would be able to look at their course material in the fully online implementation of this particular course and validate, say, yes, they've done this, they've done that. Now, either we can issue the credit, I mean, Middlebury Interactive is an accredited high school, so we could issue the credit, or we could have a teacher of record or whoever, and I don't know how that all works, but the CVU could also issue the credit or accept the credit in as done or validated, or there could be a teacher of record. I mean, we do that a lot too, where a high school will say, well, we don't have a Chinese teacher, but this Spanish teacher will be the teacher of record, and we know through looking at your curriculum and talking to you that works. So yes.
I think part of the question is, can you define what a program is? Is that it? So
No,
is
actually,
German a
he answered it.
standalone program and Spanish
I was
is
just
standalone?
curious to see like how, I studied Russian language, that's my background. So in high school, we had Russian,
Yep.
very rare.
Yep.
Middlebury College at the time, big Russian program, so I'm
Yep.
aware of that. But what I'm saying, like here, they probably don't have Russian language. But
Right.
if someone went in and wanted to study Russian language, but you answered the question, so it would become in fact an online course, and if a professor or a teacher here audited it, so to speak,
Yep.
then the credit could come through CVU, or there's sort of this.
Yeah, and I don't know the intricacies of how high schools give credit or award it. We've done a number of things. We've awarded the credit, or we've had a teacher of record that's a teacher at the high school that if there's not a certified language teacher. I mean, the other way, and again, there's so many different ways to implement this. What I would say is you have Spanish and French here, I would imagine, at CVU. The students here, if you were to take advantage of this program, the students would have access to the course. French and Spanish teachers could access the course. They could send their kids there. What is attractive or exciting about this from my perspective is that whether or not you have a textbook for French and Spanish, we have some material that we know, based on what we've done with Middlebury College, is probably better than anything else that's out there. And the ability for teachers to think creatively about how they could actually implement this is really up to them now, because cost is much less of a concern. I mean, typically the cost for this program, we normally do a 500 student cap, and it's around $25,000. So I don't know, there's probably about 700, maybe 1,100 students here in CVU. Is that about right?
13.
Okay, so typically a site license for that number of students would run somewhere in the $89,000 to $95,000. It's sort of typical pricing for that. So it becomes almost, if schools decide to take advantage of that, they need to get rid of the textbooks, because they don't have that's the resources that are funding some of the adoption of online courses. Which then, I think there's a lot that creates some tension. There's some issues around that is not always easily solved with a quick implementation. Whereas this, I think, allows some flexibility in how teachers can think about how they might use some of the material, maybe at first supplementally, and say, okay, here's some great videos about cultural interaction in Argentina, where you can learn about why people kiss on the cheek. But it doesn't have to replace their textbook at this point. So that maybe answered a little bit more what you were asking. Yeah.
I was going to ask this something just leading to. How much of it is language acquisition versus cultural awareness? in these programs?
And this is probably much more technical than anyone really cares about or wants to know. So we're aligned to ACTFL, which is the American Council on Teaching of Foreign Languages. They've set the Common Core. Their sort of Common Core has adopted the ACTFL standards that outline, the 5 different pieces of curriculum that need to be covered in order to be aligned to them. One of those is culture. What is with our courses, especially the fluency ones, the culture is ubiquitous. I mean, all the material is sort of culturally relevant or authentic. So there's not a lot of distinction between, okay, now you're in a cultural lesson, so focus on this. Obviously, we do some things like, okay, compare Argentina and how they kiss to Spain and how they kiss. How's that like your culture? So there are some particular things that we do about that, but all the material, or as much of the material as we can, is authentic. So it's not necessarily, it wasn't built by a language teacher for a language learning purpose. It was taken from a newspaper in Spain, or from a newspaper in Puerto Rico, or something along that nature. Does that sort of answer that? I mean, it's built in, it's very clear, and it built in throughout the course, that sort of cultural component, and really critical to some of the things that we do, or that we've learned from the Middlebury pedagogy. Yeah.
So how would this work for schools? We're all trying to get budgets passed
Yep.
and have finalize budgets, which don't include this, and we have a deadline of April 1st.
Yes.
Do you think just our administration would be reallocating budget items, or, you know, you have to be in by April 1st this year, or?
So the way, the details of the contract, this would not start until the next fiscal year. So for July 1, you know, we wouldn't be delivering courses into the school until September, the start of school year for 2013, 2014. I think every school and school board and school district has a different way that they allocate budget dollars, and how they find the money. I don't presume to want to tell you how to do that. I mean, what I can say is that the $6,000 is all the cost that would come to the school for this particular opportunity, and how you would allocate that or how you would do it, I think is probably an individual school board question more so. And I feel like I'm not really answering your question, so ask me a follow-up.
No, I just feel like it would be, if we'd known about this earlier, but it just started, it would be great, but that's many things for our budget.
I wish we had figured it out earlier, too.
Well, and I just want to clarify that part of Jamie providing this presentation is not a hard sell to the board.
That's
It's
right.
to understand what other opportunities are out there. For example, you know, at some point, the board might want to look at the Vermont Learning Cooperative, which is online learning. And, you know, I'd be interested in if there's any relationship there.
There
with
is,
that. So I think this is, you know, when Elaine and I and other board chairs talked about this, it was, what do we need to become better informed about opportunities for world language?
Is this one of the things that's being considered in the legislature, talking about flexible pathways?
Well, it certainly would be an example of a flexible pathway, for sure.
So, and yes, so we do have a relationship with the Vermont Virtual Learning Cooperative. They actually are a provider of our courses. They're a little bit different because they provide the teachers. They generally do individual students who want to take a specific thing that may not be offered at the school that they're at. And so this is just a different avenue to provide more access to students than maybe those one-offs. And I would say if you're only interested in, you know, half a dozen or even 100 students doing some online courses, I would definitely encourage you to go through them, because financially it doesn't necessarily make sense to do this unless you want to adopt it more wholesale. And absolutely, and this was something that was developed over the course of pretty much the month of December, and the college approached us and said, hey, we want to have a greater footprint in Vermont. We understand some of the financial pressures, and frankly, I don't think there would be very few Vermont schools that could afford us at the rate that we typically charge much larger districts. And I say that in sort of, but remind you that we're able to, with larger districts, we're able to be a little bit more flexible with the pricing. For example, you know, I was in conversations with a school district in Virginia where there's 70,000 students just in that one district, which is, you know, about the size of Vermont. So, I was speaking to LAUSD, so LA Unified School District, 350,000 students. So you can think about the scope of that, where they've got, you know, their whole elementary school population is 3 times the state of Vermont, and so when thinking about that, and that's why it kind of this particular thing has come on pretty recently in terms of the college really wanted to have a greater impact in the state around world languages. And again, I use the example of Addison County. I mean, the access to languages in some of those schools are pretty minimal, and that's the seat where Middlebury is. So I think that was really the impetus for this discussion around how they could fund it. We had some conversations with the state about how we could maybe get some funding through the state, and that didn't really pan out, but we didn't want to stop that conversation or stop this opportunity just because the state or we couldn't figure out those particularities.
So as part of it, I just want to follow up on that. So as part of it being a good neighbor, because it does seem like a really great offer.
So I can tell you, we're not going to be making a lot of money on this. So I mean, the delivery of this costs. This is, I don't know exactly what the breakdown is, but this is not something that we're going out and generating a lot of revenue. This is Middlebury saying, Middlebury College and also Middlebury Interactive, frankly, because we're discounting this about 75% of what it would typically cost. And I'm not a salesperson and I don't work in sales, so I don't want this to sound like a hard sell because it's not meant to be that. But yeah, it really is. I mean, the idea is we think there's 2 opportunities here. One, the college wanted to have a greater impact on how students in the state of Vermont get access to world languages. And 2, for Middlebury Interactive, this is a great test case. I mean, we've been in existence for 2.5 years. The majority of our students experience our courses in a fully online environment. So they're one student sitting in front of a computer with our virtual teacher, and that's how they experience the majority of what we do. We know to be more effective, we need to get into more brick and mortar and public schools and have a more of a blended type of implementation. And we think that there's a great opportunity with all the schools in Vermont who are in our backyard to really teach us a lot about how we deliver these courses, what's effective, how are students, how are students in CVU different from the students in Middlebury High, and how they move, how quickly they progress through the course, where do they get hung up, is AP something that students are interested in? How do teachers, frankly, this is not a teaching online, I think, is a departure for a lot of teachers. And so how do teachers interact with this course? And this is not a core curriculum. This is not math, science, language arts. This is an elective in most cases. And so how do schools sort of think about this from the budgetary perspective? How do they implement it? And, again, it's a learning experience for us. It's a learning experience for the schools. And yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, is being a good neighbor. Yeah.
Jamie, for your edification, as far as timing and how it's going to work in most Vermont school districts, is the administration would have to come to the boards kind of at the beginning of our budget process, which is typically going to be like an October, November timeframe, with a proposal that, this is how we want to do it and this is how it gets included in the budget. At this point, at least in this supervisory union, I think most are going to be pretty much the same. You're looking at the 2014-2015 school district, unless a school district were able to free up the funds that are already committed to something else. If anybody were to try to do something for the 2013-2014 school year, it's just kind of what it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I understand that. We've been in a number of conversations. I think we have. I think it was the last time I checked, it was 42 schools had sort of expressed interest in doing this, and I think you're right. They're sort of all over the spectrum. Some folks are able to, so Otter Valley, for example, they know that they want to do this. They've had some language acquisition things in the works already, and they're able to allocate those funds. Other schools I know are this is late in the budget cycle to have those conversations, and even $6,000, although it doesn't seem like a lot, I know is with the way budgets work, that's a lot of money.
Coming from something else.
Coming from something else, absolutely. So yeah, we understand that. We're aware of that. Unfortunately, we're sort of, the college has said, this is what we're committing. This is the 30. I think we'll revisit this next year at the launch of this to sort of think about, how many people took advantage of it, how many people signed up for the full 4 years, sort of what does that look like, and then take it from there. But absolutely, we're very aware of some of the pressures that school districts are facing. So, yeah.
Another curriculum kind of question.
Yep.
So this came out of Middlebury College. Tell me again how you got down to a high school curriculum level? There's a certain developmental difference between a 14-year-old and a 18-year-old.
Yeah, so the folks at the college, particularly in the summer language program, so the vice president of languages, his associate vice president, who's our chief learning officer, so she has the dual appointment between Middlebury College and our organization. They looked at sort of all the research out there, and they said, okay, what's all the research say about second language acquisition? And he's much smarter than I will ever be about this type of stuff. What does all the research say about second language acquisition? What do we know from the 100 years that Middlebury's been running immersion programs? How do we, and I think even more importantly than how do you make a college curriculum look more like a high school curriculum is how do you take a 7-week summer immersion experience and put it online, I think, or an immersion experience at all and put it online. So they looked at all that, and then they spent about, 8-10 months building out a scope and sequence of what a Spanish and French course looks like, and then they started building activities. And we traveled to 9 different cities in 4 different continents. We shot about 600 hours of video, and we started to build the lessons and the activities and create some really engaging curriculum. Surprisingly, beginner learners struggle with the same type of thing. So whether you're a 60-year-old trying to learn Russian or a 15-year-old trying to learn Spanish, you still need to know how to introduce yourself and how to talk about your family and what food is like. And so there's some typical things that they do in terms of the topical areas, and then they just sort of adapted that because there are some things like you can't show French people smoking or drinking in high school courses, and so there are some things that needed to be particularly adjusted for the cultural things that maybe would appear in a college course that wouldn't necessarily appear in a high school course. So a very long process with lots of arguments, and then on top of that, we also had to think about how expensive are these courses to build, how much do we think we can sell, and sort of the business side of it as well. So it was a very interesting, very drawn out process, and I think we have our organization is very interesting because we have, on one hand, sort of what you would think of as sort of a typical liberal arts college nonprofit mentality, and then we have K-12, frankly, which is a for-profit entity that has a bottom line, is publicly traded, and it has some investors that have some particular things around revenue that they want, as well as delivering great courses to students. And so we have some very interesting conversations about having a very academically driven product while also needing to know that there are some financial pressures that we all live in. So. What's that? It's like school board. Yeah, you have parents who want the best for their kids, and then you've got realities of budget pressure. So I think you're right. That is a very good analogy.
You described this offer as being made to secondary schools. Does that include K through 8?
So what we've done, and again, the primary curriculum that the college has really helped shape has been primarily at the high school level, although obviously we refreshed some courses. So the competency and exposure courses were an existing group of portfolio of courses that were prior to the formation of our company. The college has since gone back and with their pedagogy, we've gone back and refreshed those. But really, the college felt, okay, we want to make this offer to secondary schools primarily. What we've decided to do, now sort of hedging a little bit, what we've done is for any K through 8 school, we'll offer a reduced rate of $9,000 for any elementary school. So the college subsidy will not factor into the content of that. The college will, however, pay for the professional development. So there's so any K through 8 school who's interested in our courses, it'll be an additional $3,000 on top of the $6,000 for that school to take advantage of the same deal. If it's 7 through 12 or 7 through 9, I think we want to have this in more schools. So we're willing to sort of look at each one on a case-by-case basis and have that conversation with either the school board, the principal, the superintendent. I mean, this is not about the $3,000 here, the $3,000 here. This is about getting more schools in Vermont to have, and more students to have access to our courses. So I think it'll be case-by-case. But the college will pay, they will subsidize all the professional development no matter what the site, and then the most it would ever cost a school is $9,000.
Any questions in that direction? Feel free to.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for schools like ours that already have language programs in place,
Yep.
how do these two coexist? Or
Yeah.
do they?
Absolutely. So I think the best way to sort of describe it is if you look at this one over here. So in an environment, so say for example Spanish, which most high schools have a Spanish teacher. They probably have a high school textbook that's probably published by either Vista, maybe Pearson, McGraw-Hill are the big ones. We could do a number of different things. We could, and it would. This is where the professional development piece would come in. So where the teachers want to continue using their curriculum, we would train them on how to use the material that we've created in a supplemental environment. So that could mean, today they studied the ear conjugation in Spanish. So then our professional development would help the teachers become familiar enough with the course so then they could assign out through our learning management system exercises that the kids could do at home that focus on what they've learned in the grammatical lesson that day. Most our stuff's scoped and sequenced to typical high school language courses, so more likely than not, whatever they're practicing or whatever they're studying in the textbook would be reflected somewhere in our courses. Maybe not exactly one for one, but there'd be some sort of replication there. So they could use it in that environment. They could say, look, I don't want to use this at all. High school kids, Spanish students, if you want to go out on your own, here's your credentials, log on, in your study hall, after school, at home, you can access whenever you want. There's an additional time for you to hear the language. We use a lot of authentic material, so native speakers at native speeds, and they could just access that completely independently on their own. The other way is we could come in and we could replace the curriculum. So a teacher will have their course, their textbook. This could come in and this is built out to be 180 days, 45 to 50 minutes a day for that whole year, with a midterm and a final and on both semesters. So it could come in and replace that curriculum entirely, where the teacher is then providing that access. The other thing that we've done a lot of, and in particular in New York City, we've got teachers who are teaching multiple levels. So, if you're a high school teacher, you usually teach Spanish 1, then you teach Spanish 2 to Spanish 3. in many implementations that we've done, the teacher stops sort of sitting up in front of the class and they become more of a mentor, and they'll move around to small groups where students at different levels are moving through the course kind of at their own pace, and it frees up the teacher to use any of the exercises that they would need to correct. They could do that at home, sort of like homework that is in our learning management system, and that they become more interactive with the kids through the course while they're using it in the class. Did that sort of answer? So a lot of different implementations. I think, to be realistic, I think the best way that teachers could use it initially, if you have that language teacher, is use it supplementally. Take a year, become familiar with the content, and then decide whether or not you want to have it as in a different type of implementation. Other questions? Yeah.
Back to operationally speaking, so again, for the larger languages where you might have an educator in place, could you have one proctor, so to speak, that could handle all the odd languages? You know, the 2 kids that want to study Latin, the 1 person that wants to still speak Russian.
Yeah, so absolutely. Say you wanted, a couple of kids take Chinese, a couple of kids take Latin, a couple of kids take German. You have Spanish or French kind of covered. What they need is access to a computer, and they need someone who has been trained on, okay, the Flash player crashed, or you don't have the right browser set up. And we have lots of technical expertise, but they're usually located somewhere else. So they're not, you can call them on the phone and say, hey, doesn't this work? But what I've seen, it's most useful when a kid is in a class and they have 40 minutes and they need to get something done. If they don't have the right browser or something's crashed, then that's a real pain, and it can blow that up. So it's great to have either a language teacher who's familiar, maybe not with that specific language, but just sort of language pedagogy in general. But definitely a tech person, it's helpful to have. So if you have a group of maybe 15, 20 students in a study hall, they're doing 5 or 6 different languages, having somebody who has some technical expertise that's been trained by us on how to troubleshoot some of the problems is always a really useful thing.
So it's more important for tech support than actually a language teacher, is what you're saying?
Well, it depends on the implementation. In the instances where you don't have a teacher that has facility in that language, then I think tech support is an important function. If you have a Spanish teacher that's there, then it's both. But I've just seen, and again, all know your schools much better than I do. The software and the hardware in the schools also play a role. We have some minimum tech requirements, but a great example is, so in Weybridge, we have students using our program. They just had not said that the IP address of our courses were okay to come into the school, so no one could get the access to the course, and we were sitting around scratching our heads like, how the heck, we're logging on, it's booting us off after 5 minutes. It had nothing to do with, other than the fact that they just hadn't white labeled the IP. And another great example is, so we had this in Chicago, the speed coming into the school was great. Great speed, T1 connection coming in. T1 connections all through the very high speed all through there. They just hadn't flipped a switch that allowed, when it entered the school, when it hit the building, to continue at that speed. And so all the videos were crashing. So little things like that, which you think would not, in a school district where they have very small amount of time, it has a lot of impact on that kind of thing. So I think we come out and we help with some of that troubleshooting, but having a tech person and working with them is always helpful for the implementation. Yeah.
And just following up on Kelly's question, you would probably also need someone who understands pedagogy, who understands how to use it for teaching purpose.
So so in the instances where they're your teachers delivering the course, that's what we do during our professional development sessions. We train them on how to use this particular technology in an immersive environment, and we sort of train them on that. Now, I think, especially in Vermont, I think there's some great world language teachers here who probably are ahead of the game than many other states. But that's what we focus a lot on the professional development. So there's the technical aspect of the professional development that says, okay, in order to get a grade out of the learning management system, you have to do this. But we also do a lot on, okay, how do you use, we do video where there's no sound. How do you teach students how to look at body language to understand the context of the situation to help them decipher the language? So we do a lot of that kind of training too. In the instances where we're providing the teacher, it varies. I don't think there's a good or a bad recommendation on does there need to be a language pedagogy person in the room. If we're teaching Chinese characters, it may not have that much of an impact if you've got someone who has a Romance language background. If you've got someone who's great at tech stuff and they can help that student navigate when their player crashes, that's probably more effective in those kinds of fully virtual environments. Yeah.
How much experience?
Probably a lot. Do you have implementing these kinds of things in after-school programs, summer programs, holiday, that kind of thing?
Quite a bit. I mean, we get asked a lot for after-school programs and for gifted and talented, so extended day programs, extended school programs. So we have a number of implementations where we've done that. The summer school, actually, we have a model where students can sign up on their own, so not through a school district, just sort of a consumer model where they sign up and do a summer program. Our courses are built on a 180-day school year, but they're modular, so you can say, okay, I want 40 days, or I want 50 hours, or something like that. Or, students can move more quickly. If you have more time than 40 minutes a day, you can move more quickly through it. So, again, the flexibility of the course allows for a lot of different types of implementations, but we have done a number of summer and after-school programs, and it's been pretty successful. I think in particular, sort of the middle school level. The other thing that we do is we also offer, especially middle school and sort of younger grades, we offer 2 weeks of 5 languages. So it's like half a semester, but they can experience 5 languages in the course of those 2 weeks just to sort of spark their interest in what they want to do. And maybe they get great attraction to German, or maybe they're really into Spanish, but they haven't even ever seen the options for that. So a lot of experience, and definitely the implementation piece and working through that plan is something that's critical.
And a little bit aside, but what do you do about districts, SUs, where there's a high school and 5 feeding schools?
Yeah.
So K-8s, and price-wise, what happens there?
That's a great question. Call the salesman. No. So no, we definitely offer some discounted pricing for basically the way that I've experienced with the technology. The bigger the number of students, the bigger number of licenses we're delivering to, the more flexible we can be with our discounting. I can tell you what we're offering through the Vermont deal with the Middlebury subsidy, that's as low as it'll ever be. So even if you banded together probably the whole state, it would probably be a similar type of price, because this is pretty close to where we are in terms of able to deliver the courses and still sort of cover our costs. So I would say I'm happy to have that conversation, or actually pass you off to someone who can give you some more information specifically on district-wide or supervisory union pricing. I don't think it'll be cheaper than what is through this offer, but we're, again, happy to talk about it.
So we've got time for maybe one more question, or?
In our school district, we recently purchased some learning software where, we could buy this much and the kids could only use it in school, but if we bought just a little more, they could use it at home, and younger kids at home could use it. Is there an option in here where you could expand the learning to, if my child has access to this, could I log on and use it as well as a parent?
That's a good question. So because we don't have a hard cap on the number of licenses we're providing, every student in the school can have a username and password and log on to whatever course they're interested in. Depending on how the course is being offered, the teacher or us or Middlebury Interactive has the ability to limit access to different areas. Now, let me just say, we're never going to say, okay, this is one price for this access, and now just a little bit more money will get you the full. This is the full thing, right? Now, I'm just clarifying, but the ability for the teacher or whoever's sort of the administrator of the program, students could probably move, if they got really engaged in this, they can move through it in probably a couple of weeks if they really want. If they spent a number of hours after school at home, they can move through it very quickly. So what generally happens is teachers will shut down access to particular areas until they've completed one section. But no, there's no limit. So your son, Jay Smith, which probably is not his name, if he went home and if you logged on at 10 o'clock at night, we're not going to say, oh, that's outside the sort of normal hours. No, we're going to shut it off. So I kind of answered your question, but yeah, there's no sort of limit to once a student gets access to the course, they can access. The only limit would be imposed by the administrator on how much they could be based on how quickly or slowly they wanted to move through the course.
Jamie, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
12.0 adjournment. Need a motion to adjourn, please? And a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No? Okay. Thank you. And those of you who have a last board meeting tonight, enjoy it.